Welcome to the oh, start over. And yeah, I'm sorry. If you could. Ready? Welcome to the Author Show and its first showcase on Bremerton Kitsap Access Television. I'm your host, Ingemar Anderson, and in each show we will conduct interviews with local authors, present examples of local books by members of our community, and we are going to present other subjects related to publishing. In this first episode, we'll be interviewing Dan Whedon. Dan Whedon is a business growth consultant. He has innovative ideas on helping entrepreneurs and business owners grow, develop, and protect their businesses and people. He is also an award-winning speaker and member of the $1 Million Consulting Hall of Fame. Welcome, Dan Whedon.
Happy to be here. Thanks, Ingemar.
You're welcome. Today, we will be speaking about Dan's latest book entitled Unleashed Leadership. The book has been published and is available since 2015. And Dan, my first question I have for you is, and it's only one question so far.
Oh, good. I'm good at answering one at a time.
Yeah. I plan to ask you two questions, but we'll start with the first one.
Okay.
What inspired you to write Unleashed Leadership?
What inspired me to write Unleashed Leadership? Well, as Ingemar mentioned in the beginning, I am a consultant. And what I realized is that I do a lot of writing because that's how I get the word out about my strategies, my concepts, my tactics. And as I did more writing, I realized, I should write a book. And so that was really the impetus, is I wanted to be able to put something into writing as part of intellectual property for my business, and a book was the ideal way to do it. So I think really the inspiration is I wanted to be able to compile my thinking, my thoughts, and my strategies into a book form that I could give to business owners and entrepreneurs to use.
Right. This actually leads me to a second question that just came into my head while you were answering. Do you think it's a good exercise for a person to write, especially business people, to write a subject down? What did you get out of that exercise to write things, as you said, in a book form? Is there a learning process, or how do you value that experience in itself?
Well, I think there is a learning process. Prior to writing the book, I was writing a lot of blogs. I have a column in the Kitsap Sun, Kitsap Business Journal, a monthly column since 2010, and I realized I'd written hundreds of thousands of words, but they were a mishmash. And so to be able to take your concepts and your topics and string them together in a book format, chapter by chapter, that's a harder thing to do. And in fact, as we were going through the process, you may remember this, with our editor, I told her probably the most important thing you can do is make sure that I'm not repeating the same story 3 or 4 times, because when I'm writing it, I don't remember what I wrote 3 or 4 weeks ago. And so the learning process is to really take and become structured and have a plan, very similar to running a business.
Well, that's a great answer, because you highlighted, as a process to get to becoming a good writer. Not everybody is a writer from the start. There are some talents that are, but writing is just like any other profession that you have to learn. And I think this is a good takeaway for any person who wants to write or has a business and thinks about writing a book about their business. So great. I do have one question that I was thinking about, specifically for your book. Every author has a different goal with their book.
Right.
And what was your goal? What did you want to achieve with your book?
Well, my book might be a little bit different than many other authors whose goal it is to sell books. Now, certainly I want to sell books, but in reality, I probably give away as many books as I actually sell, because my goal is to get the books in the hands of business owners, to have them read it, and to have them give me a call and say, we need to talk, because something in your book you wrote resonated with me. And I can't tell you how many times I've given a book to somebody, and then we've had a meeting, and they bring the book with them, and I noticed that they have, it just happened the other day, highlighted several areas. And that's what I want. I want them to be able to see things in that book that would work well in their business. And then because I'm a consultant, I'd like to be able to work with them. So really, if you think of it in those terms, it's a loss leader for me. It's an opportunity to get my work in front of people so that they know how I can help them, and then hopefully we'll be able to do business together.
Do you think that would be a good idea for any business or just for the consulting business?
No, I think any business can benefit from writing a book, but it'll depend on the industry a little bit, and it'll depend on the reason you're writing that book. Probably for services, it's more than products. You know, products might be a tough one unless you're writing about how to put the product together, which I have trouble with instructions. But for services, so whether you're a real estate agent, an insurance agent, maybe you're an attorney or a CPA, consultants, speakers, coaches, people like that extend services, the ability to get your smarts, you know, the intellectual capital that you have, and you can manifest it into a book, which then becomes your intellectual property. To be able to put that into that format, give it to somebody, and say, read this, listen, you know, tell me what you think about it. Then you have a way to really broadcast widely what it is that you do and how it is you can help them, because that's really in the end what we're trying to do.
Right, help them. And you know, I think you brought up this point I never thought about. Is you're right. It's actually really for all service companies could benefit. Product companies who create products, you're right. That's actually a different. That wouldn't, you know, a book wouldn't really be so efficient. But anybody who has a service company,
so for
that's
instance,
interesting.
I and you know this because you were one of our guests. I'm co-host of a nationally syndicated podcast called The Shrimp Tank. And Brad Berger is my co-host. Well, Brad is a wealth manager, and he wrote a book. And he wrote a book about wealth management for the very same purpose, is that he's getting his ideas, his thoughts out there. Somebody's going to read it and like that. Very similar to you. You're a publisher. You have a service that you offer. You write a book about how important it is to publish. Same type of a thing. So I think anybody that has a service can write a book, and that it would be valuable for them.
As a publisher, I would say should write a book.
Should write a book. Okay, yeah. Should write it through Kitsap Publishing.
Exactly. So we talked about your profession and how do you. So let's get a little bit more to the you know, to the nitty gritty. In your
We
profession,
weren't in the nitty gritty yet.
Well,
that wasn't the nitty gritty. Oh boy.
There's
okay, now it's coming.
a deep
All right.
hole.
Okay.
No, I mean it is already a good start, but I mean, publishing in itself is a very complex process, really. You know, as we did this now for 2.5 years, and you know, on the surface, you see the book. You're welcome to, you know, use your book and show it. We will show the book also to the audience, of course. But you know, publishing is a very long process when you think about it, from the manuscript, from the idea, put it on paper or on the computer, and then we format it. And so nitty gritty, I meant like, you know, you came to me with a proposal, a book proposal, and that goes already pretty much in a more detailed area, especially for the marketing part. And I did want to ask you a little bit about the marketing part. So you laid out how you want to, you know, get the book out there, and you use it in your speaking engagements. You use it when you consult. Can you talk a little bit more about how exactly you're doing this? So you have like speaking engagements, and then you bring the book in with you, or it's part of the
I'd be happy to talk
the fee
about
that people pay. Yeah, that would be great.
No. So I do a lot of speaking, and I do that as part of my marketing. And I bring my book with me. So if I'm in a place where I'm speaking, and maybe there's 100 people, maybe there's 200, maybe there's 1,000, I'll bring books with me to have available for people to purchase, because I'm going to talk about concepts in the book in my speech. And and that's part of the reason I wrote a book, is that afterwards somebody comes and says, boy, I didn't write all the notes down. Well, I have a book. And so I make the book available. Oftentimes I'll make it, if it's a large group, I may give a discount for people buying it right then and there. But that's one of the ways that I can use the book as part of the total marketing when I'm speaking. I also have the book available on my website. I give the book to many people. I will also ask them to review the book. And so you can go onto Amazon and you can see the reviews of the book. Social media platforms, I use Facebook, I use LinkedIn, I use Twitter, I use Google+, I use Instagram, Pinterest. I use all of those to advertise the book. And when somebody is kind enough to give me a review, if it's a good review, hopefully they're mostly good. If it's a review, then I'll put it out on my blog as well. And I'll put it under rave reviews. And so that way people get an idea, hey, somebody read this, somebody other than the author, and they had something good to say about it. I'm going to check it out a little bit more.
I looked on your Amazon page. Of course I do, because we listed the book there. And
Yeah.
you have about 30 reviews or more on your book, and all are 5 stars, something
Probably
like that.
all my family.
What do you do
It's
all
probably all my family.
What do you
who
do
did
with
that.
all the bad reviews?
Well, since there's none, yeah, well, the bad reviews go to Captain Jack.
Right, who's that?
Captain
Explain.
Jack is my Jack Russell Terrier. He's also my co-author. He writes a small anecdote at the end of every chapter.
Is he on the book here?
He's in the book.
Right,
Yeah.
on the picture.
He's on the
We
back.
show it.
Can I show that?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to show it. Captain Jack is right there. He's the good-looking one, right there, Captain Jack. And so he gets the bad reviews, and he does one of 3 things with it. He'll either urinate on it, play with it, or eat it. And so any one of those 3 could actually happen.
There we go.
I'm just kidding. He does. We don't let him do that in the house. Just kidding. But Captain Jack is a writer, and he's gotten good reviews, and people have told me that he's better than me, and that he deserves a raise. And so what I've told them is that he gets free food, free rent, and free health care for life. And so he's got a pretty good deal.
So he's a very important part of your book.
Well, he's actually part of it. I joke a lot about Captain Jack, but that's the whole concept of Unleashed. You can see the fence there, the whole concept of being unleashed and unleashing your potential. Because Captain Jack, if he gets unleashed, he has no qualms in going out and creating his own adventures and unleashing his potential. And I think entrepreneurs and business owners should do the same. So he was actually the inspiration for the concept around Unleashed.
Right, I like that concept a lot. The first time I read your manuscript and your book proposal, I love the idea, because it's a metaphor that you can apply to, and I like that idea, to be unleashed. This book is, by the way, very, very good, well written.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I got very good reviews just personally as well.
Oh, good, thank you.
So, yeah, let's see what other questions we could ask you, which are totally off the, not in the flow now, but random. What is the best way to market your books? You talked about it, the Twitter, and
well, what's the best way to market my book?
your book, yeah.
But there are many ways to market any book, and social media makes it easy and easier than ever. And I think that's one of the important parts about having a cover that is attractive.
And early in the
very
process.
early in the process. And I'm trying to remember when we had the cover in our process. I'm not sure if I recall, but having it early in the process is really important, because just like how people buy wine, they look at the wine label. People will often be attracted to a book to at least look underneath the hood, so to speak, based on the cover.
Yep. Yeah, the cover is one thing. As a publisher, that's our first big concern.
Right.
We want to make this right. A cover when it's a make or break deal.
But
really
anybody who wants to market a book, social media is a really important way. I think Pinterest is a up and coming way. I've spoken to people who are bookstore owners, and they sell a lot on Pinterest.
Wow,
and so that I found that to be interesting.
Yeah. So what kind of research did you do when you wrote your book? I guess, I started writing my own book years ago, and I I started to do research on the topics that I was writing, and I found like you can get lost in this whole process, just finding the right things and put it together. Was that a difficult task
No,
to do?
because I didn't. The research is all here. These are all my concepts, my topics, and so it really didn't for me. There wasn't a lot of research involved. What I will say is that the little bit of research that was done was by the editor. She did a fantastic job.
Right, okay.
And so she was a huge help for me because I'm not a researcher. And so there were some things that I had written about that required research. And so I would say this got a great editor because that editor went the extra mile, and she corrected me on some of the things that were not necessarily completely correct or not, a little bit inaccurate. And so we took care of that. And so that's an important part. But because this is my intellectual capital, I didn't really have to do a lot of research on it.
Right. Yeah, you're a consultant, I guess. Right. That's right. It's all learning all these decades and years before that come together. In the book.
Most of the research was just kind of telling historical stories, or giving anecdotes about other things that she would just make sure and then footnote in there to show proof of that.
How many hours a day did you write when you wrote that book?
It's a discipline. Just like anything else, it's a discipline.
Right.
And what worked best for me was an hour and a half every other day. An hour and a half every other day. I would just put it on my calendar. And because I am a morning person, I'm most creative in the morning, that's when I chose to write. And I would just pick the same time. I'd usually start about 8. I'd go 8:30 to 10 on the days I was writing. It's when I had the most energy. It's when I was thinking the best. If I tried to write it in the afternoon, there's probably nothing afternoon related in there because I'm just not very good there. So for me, I realized, okay, this is when I'm most creative, when I have the most energy, and that's when I'm going to write.
Well, we talked about editing and writing. A question would be here, it's kind of a fun question. Is there anything not in the book that you took out in the editing process which you thought, well, let's think about that? Or, because you wrote, mostly, when you write, when I wrote a lot, and then I took only sections. And were there things that you thought you don't want to
hit the cutting room floor? No, I can't think of any. And in fact, the editing process was really cool. Bethany and I had a great relationship where the way we worked it out is I ended up sending her chapter by chapter when it was done, but I said I don't want to see it until the very end. I did not want to become distracted by what I'd written before. And so when I was done with the book, she would send me chapter by chapter and we would go through it. And we would, most of our discussions were around grammar and making sure that the grammar was right. And in some cases and actually it was funny, in some cases we went with the non-grammar to deal with the alliteration because there's an art and a science to this. But there were no stories or anything that I wish I had in there that was left off. It really came down to the structure, the grammar. A lot of times I would use pronouns when I should have been using the actual name or let's say of the person, because she would say, well, who is he? Who are they? And so it was like, okay, that's right. I got to get out of my own head. So the editing part was really more about structure.
Right. Yeah. The readability.
That's correct.
And the flow too. So editing is much more than just looking at commas and
look. The reality is, and I'll tell this to anybody: if don't make the mistake of not editing.
Very good.
Don't make the mistake of having somebody who is not a professional editor do it. So if your spouse or best friend says they're an editor, great, but don't have them edit your book.
Or have them edited, but then have somebody else also edit it.
Well, this is how it went. If we're on editing, I had Bethany edit. We went through 3 rounds of editing.
Wow.
And then my daughter, who has a master's degree in nursing, so she's a smart cookie. She had just gotten home from school, and so she had a little extra time on her hands. So she read through it after that, just being a reader, not being an editor, being a reader. And she caught a couple things. And those are just misspellings. After the point, we went through 3 rounds, and I read it once, and she read it twice. It's like, we're done. You can't have it. There's not going to be a perfect book out there. but it's going to be just about as close. You can go really crazy in the details.
Yeah.
And so both daughters were very helpful in just reading it. My wife was helpful, but that all came after the editing that dealt with grammar and language. This was more about readability. This was more about catching in a misspelled word that got bias. That was really all it was.
Cool. Do you Google yourself?
That's a really kind of a strange question to ask me.
It's
Ingmar.
a personal question.
It's a very personal question.
As author, not as whatever.
You know what? Do I Google myself? Yes, but not because of as an author. I constantly, not constantly, I have Google Analytics, and probably once a month I will Google myself because I want to see what comes up first. I'm interested in it from a consulting and a marketing standpoint, what shows up first. That's really the only reason I do it. But I do have Google Analytics, and that keeps me in touch with
The question is really, I think it's an important question as author to know how they appear in public or even on the computer and on the internet. Right. If you find a new book and you want to read about, want to read the book, my experience is many readers, potential readers, they research first a little bit about the person. They're very critical. Sometimes they're impulse buys. They just buy a book, they see it in the shelf. But I think the appearance on the internet, online, is very important for every author. Actually, I know that it's very important. So you want to Google yourself. It was a personal question.
Well, no, I was just joking. Well, you want to Google yourself because you want to see if your name is coming up.
And your book.
And your book. But I would caution this, and that's not to be too thin-skinned. Not everybody is going to like your book.
That's
not everybody, and that's okay.
Yeah.
I know I have all the 5-star people, and that's all great. But I'm sure there's people out there who said I don't agree with this, or I don't think this is very well written, and that's okay. It's really not about the standing ovation. It's about, can you put this in the book, this book in the hands of people who it can help? And if it only helps 10% of the people who read it, okay, that's 10% more than would have been. So I think it's really important for authors not to get so protective and serious about what people say, because in social media that can happen. We see it in all the time.
Yep.
And you can drive yourself crazy if you're trying to please everybody, and that's the last thing an author should do. In fact, I would say this: an author should poke the bear a little bit. Do you know what poking the bear is?
Provoke people?
That's right. Provoke. I didn't know if that translated over to. But yeah, you want to be you want to provoke in a positive way. You want to make people think.
Right.
I think it's really important to be contrarian in some places to be able to get some, because listen, if it's not, it becomes boring.
It has to be news. It has to be something that's engaging.
Yes.
And engaging is actually a magical word for a publisher.
Yeah.
But going back to the original question,
Sure.
when you Google yourself, that's just the first thing to look. Am I appearing? Is my book appearing?
Am I showing up?
How you deal with negative response or positive response? That's the next question I actually had.
Okay.
Was like, how do you deal with negative feedback? But you already did, which is exactly how an author should think with with feedback. It's about the book, and it's about how you can help people.
I think it's important to look at negative feedback and take a look at it for what it is. If all of a sudden I had a trend of people saying that it wasn't about the content, but it was about the grammar,
you should take action.
Well, all of a sudden we may have a problem in the editing, because that's no good. You should be diligent on that. Yet your content is your content.
You have to stand to it.
You have to stand to it, and so you shouldn't take it too seriously. You should use Google and any other search engine optimization just to make sure that you're out there.
Right.
Now, I don't have a common name. Dan Whedon is not a common name.
That's right.
Some other folks may have more of a common name, and that becomes even more important to make sure that whatever little crawlers go through the internet is getting your book out there. So I'm lucky in that regard.
What was an early experience where you learned that language had power?
Wow. an early experience where I learned language. I got one. I've got one. I was probably I was probably 10, 11 years old.
Wow.
And I had a good friend. I won't give his whole name. His name was Alex. Name is Alex still, but we were probably 10, 11 years old, and he played. We all played football, but he was very good. And we had this thing to go out and sell candy bars and go door to door. And he was very nervous about doing it. And so I said, I'll go with you. And so I did all the talking. And he just stood there, and people bought candy from him. I don't know if this is a sales thing, but what I learned is that the language is important. So if you're going to sell candy, you don't just knock on the door and say, hey, you want some candy? You got to give a story. And so I made up all of these things about Alex being the next Franco Harris and things like that. And people either thought I was cute or they wanted me to get out of the way, but they bought stuff from him. So you learn that you have to be engaging, you have to be a storyteller, you have to, and I didn't think of that all back then, but I know it now, but you have to get people interested in you, or else they're going to shut the door in your face, or shut the door on your book, and be gone. So language controls so much of not only the business world, but our professional life as well.
Yep. We have 2 more questions.
Okay.
One easy one.
One easy and one hard?
Yep.
Okay.
The last one is hard.
Okay, I'll take the easy one first.
Easy first?
Sure.
Okay. You're working on another book right now?
Yes and no. Yes and no. I don't have another full book like this. It takes a lot of work. To write a book like this takes a lot of work. And in so doing, it takes away time from the other marketing that I do as a consultant. And this book is still pretty new, and I'm still getting in the hands of a lot of people. And I think this book has more mileage on it. When the time comes that I'm a year away from thinking it doesn't, then I'll do another one. What I am looking at doing is I have a weekly newsletter. It's called Extra Points. You can go to my website at danweeden.com and sign up for Extra Points. And it's just a short weekly missive. Well, I'm nearing 400 of those. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put together a small compilation book of the 101 of the best of those, and it'll be something that a business owner or entrepreneur can read daily and have 101 of those. And so it's still my work, it's still my writing, but it won't be as structured, and it's already written. So I really just have to now go figure out. So I'll have my daughters and my wife and Captain Jack and Bella, the dogs, go through, pick out the best 101, and we'll put them out there.
That's cool. This is always good. It's almost like a how-to.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's more of a daily type thing.
Right. So with the last question, what do you do if you don't do book writing and all that? Do you think you do a lot of things beside like Rotary? You have some
you mean
coaching
outside
work,
of my business?
Outside of your business.
I am a Rotarian. I've been in Rotary for almost 24 years. I'm a member of the Paulsbo Club, and I'm a past president there. I do a lot of golfing, or I'd like to do more golfing if the weather was a little bit nicer, but I like to golf. I like to read, believe it or not. I like to watch TV. I'm a TV watcher. I'm now watching, we're binge watching the Sherlock movies on Netflix, so I like to watch TV. And you know what? I just like to hang out with my wife. We've been married over 30 years, and like to hang out with her and the dogs, and just have fun.
Great. Well, Dan, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
This was a very interesting discussion. I hope the audience learned or was engaged and find, like maybe some treasures in our discussion. Which
just one. We just need one.
At least one. That's right. So with this, I'd like to say thank you to Dan Weeden and also the entire crew here at Public Access Television for their support. I hope you have enjoyed our show today, and that it encouraged you to learn more about the publishing process and the opportunities you have. And maybe it inspired you really to write your own book and come to publish it. And with that, I wish you all a good rest of the day, and I hope we will see you soon back here at our next The Author Show.